This week on the podcast, we're joined by a man who's played one of Weatherfield's most notorious bad boys, won a shelf full of awards for his acting and photography work, and is just about to step into the shoes of Warden Stamas in the UK and Ireland tour of The Shawshank Redemption. If you've been watching classic Coronation Street on ITV3 recently, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. It's the brilliant Bill Ward. Bill, thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you for having me.
No worries. So, yeah, over the last few days, ITV3 viewers have seen Charlie come to his grisly end. It must be one of the Coronation Street's, yeah, most kind of grisly, unsettling murders. What are your thoughts looking back on it about the exit that they prepared for you?
Oh, I just thought it was brilliant. I
Mm,
loved it. It was so clever. It was just such a brilliant piece of writing.
mm.
And with Coronation Street, that's how it works. It's the writing. Sort of famously, when you do any soap, really, but specifically Coronation Street, and when I was doing it, it was kind of 6 episodes a week. So the amount of time that you have for filming is very limited. So
Mm.
you are reliant on the writing, and if you've got good writing, you've always got a chance. And the writing on Corrie, I'm sure now, and certainly when I was doing it, was just first class. And so for me, with that exit, for me, it was just it was so poetic. It was Charlie Stubbs getting his comeuppance in a way that A, only Tracy Barlow could do, and B, in a way that Charlie Stubbs most deserved.
You reckon he
So I
deserved it, do you? He had
Oh
it
my God,
coming.
yeah. Oh, he was a horrendous individual, just a vile human being. But from an acting point of view, absolutely fascinating.
Mm,
So,
mm.
from my point of view, I loved him as a character because to try and get under the skin of someone like that is I mean, it's a real treat to be able to get your hands kind of on that kind of source material because he was written with so many layers
Yeah.
that he was a really fascinating character. So I loved it,
Mm.
and the actual the way he got killed, whilst bashed on the head with an ornament, whilst receiving a lap dance from his
Yeah.
girlfriend Tracy was it's just genius writing. That it was very clever,
It
and
was, it was,
I,
it
I
was
I
so
loved it.
dark, so dark. And I loved. I think you're right about the writing. I loved the build up to it because we had weeks beforehand of Tracy. Like she's up to something. She's making Claire next door think that she's being abused. She's getting herself with the iron. I don't remember at the time whether I knew that you were going to get killed off, back going 20 years ago. But it's so clever, and everybody believed her.
Yeah, and it was Charlie kind of getting his comeuppance from his own manipulation,
Mm,
what was really interesting about it when the producers put those two characters together. I think both Kate Ford and I, who's a brilliant actor,
mm,
just wonderful human, and both Kate and I both thought it was just a really good idea
mm.
to put those two characters together because they were both as manipulative
Yeah,
as each other and both as tenacious as at each other and both with a skewed moral compass
yeah.
as each other. So in that kind of way, it was kind of the ultimate bad off and
Mm,
between the two, and it was just fascinating to see kind of who was going to win out and how it was going to happen. So from my point of view, from an acting point of view, it was just magnificent because you've got these two characters, both of whom are fully aware of the danger, potential danger from the other character that they're playing opposite,
mm.
and yet, both of those characters thought they were smart enough to deal with it, and
Yeah.
actually, it turned out Charlie wasn't, and
Mm.
which was a huge surprise to him, just because he always got his way with everybody else. So from
Mm.
that kind of point of view, it was just a fabulous piece of writing because you've just got someone who thinks they are not quite invulnerable or immortal, but pretty much in control of pretty much everything. That was the thing about Charlie. The whole point about Charlie was control.
Mm.
That was his thing, and I mean, it was obviously a domestic abuse storyline, and I'm sure we'll get onto it. That the writers played out with him, and Shelley played brilliantly wonderful Sally
Mm.
Lindsay, and in that kind of a way. But that was his whole thing, was control and controlling individuals, whether they were men or women, incidentally. Anyone in his life that came into his orbit, Charlie thought and wanted to control. And so, in that kind of a way, to come up against someone who was actually, even though he didn't realize it, slightly outside of his control, was what did for him in the
Mm.
end.
I'd forgotten the scene that you had. I think it was earlier on in the episode or the episode before, where Tracy pretty much tells Charlie she's going to kill him, and
Yeah,
you're
what
like,
she's going to
"No,
do.
you're not."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and that's kind of it, because he kind of thought he was just always right. And so, in that kind of a way, he never quite believed anyone else was as dangerous or as manipulative as
Mm.
he was.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
in that kind of a way, anything, and also he kind of thought he had Tracy's number. And he kind of thought, even though, I mean, part of what will have excited him about her was that she was dangerous,
Mm.
and that he had met his match both intellectually and morally, actually.
Mm.
And that will have excited him about her. But I ultimately he never expected her to be smarter than him, and so he let his guard down,
Yeah.
and it didn't do him any good.
Did you obviously this story meant the end for Charlie on the street, no coming back there. But did you talk to Kate Ford about what she expected long term? And obviously she's back on the show now, and they managed to twist it to get her back. But did she kind of go into this thinking, well, that's my time on the cobbles done as well?
No, I mean, you would need to speak to her about that. I mean, I'd given the producers on the show a year's notice,
Right.
because I'd been doing it. I didn't live in Manchester. I'm not from Manchester,
Mm.
and at the time, because we were filming so many episodes a week, sometimes it was just bleeding into the weekend, some of the filming, and I was finding it difficult to get home, and also, but also with a character like that, there is an awareness that to keep a character like that in a show like Coronation Street for a long time, you're probably going to have to file off his rough edges a little
Mm.
bit. And what was interesting about Charlie Stubbs to me was his rough edges. That was the thing that had drawn me to him right back to the very first audition, actually, that I
Mm.
did for it, was his rough edges. And this just, it was the darkness to him, and the manipulative quality of him.
Mm.
And also the sort of the physical threat that he very rarely carried out, but you knew he had. And so, in that kind of a way, I kind of thought it was probably better from an acting point of view to play him to the hilt
Yeah.
for like 3.5 years, whatever it was, 420, 430 episodes, to play him to the hilt and then sort of say, that's it, rather than sort of with a character like that, there is a danger that he might get slightly watered down a little bit, not in a bad way, and it'd be great for him to be in the show. But for me, like I say, the bits that had interested me about him actually probably were his extremes.
Yeah.
And if you're going to keep a character like that in a show like that, because when you do have someone who's a nasty piece of work in the soap world, they have to get their comeuppance. It's
Mm.
really important morally that characters like that cannot be seen to get away with that kind of behavior over the long term, and as they shouldn't in the real world
Mm.
either.
Mm.
And so, in that kind of a way, I'd sort of made a choice about a year out, which was just to play him to the hilt and go, if you see what I mean. And so, in
Yeah.
that kind of way, I was absolutely delighted with the story that they wrote for him, because it was so multi-layered, it was
Mm.
so clever, it
Mm.
was so well written, and in that kind of a way, I thought it really, really suited him.
Yeah. What are your memories of filming that final scene in the lounge of number six? Was it a quite fun one to do? It just seems so intense.
Well, it was intense, and also you kind of it's very interesting filming an out story like that because the writing you know you have a responsibility to the show, to do a great job. Alan Waring was the director on it, and
Mm.
he did such a good job on those final episodes. And so you've got a responsibility to the show. You've also got a responsibility to the characters. And so, and particularly with something like that, you just want the characters to kind of play out to their maximum potential. And also, when I'd read it, you kind of go, this is such good fun,
Yeah.
so dark, but such good fun that you also want to make sure that you hit the comedy beats and also for me, what was important about Charlie was that he didn't know. He kind of thought he was in control of the situation. And for me, it was important that he felt in control of the situation up to and including the point where he got killed.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of it. He just didn't know. He hadn't expected that Tracy was capable of doing anything like that, like actually killing him,
No.
possibly doing something kind of slightly underhand. But I don't think he'd realised she was that dangerous. And for me, it was very important to keep that sense of him thinking he was in control,
Mm.
even when he actually wasn't. So that's kind of what we played out. And
Mm.
so you've got a man sleepwalking almost to his own destruction, thinking and totally oblivious to it.
Mm.
And that, I think, was the key to those kinds of scenes, is right up until the moment he got whacked on the head, he thought he was in control,
Yeah.
and it turns out he wasn't.
The direction was so good because the camera keeps panning and showing you the statue. It's like there, and Tracy's close to picking it up. And even if you didn't know what was going to happen, you're thinking, "Oh, is it going to?" But yeah, Charlie completely caught unawares by this. But
Yeah, I mean, he was too busy singing along to Oasis at the
yeah,
time and drinking, and so in that kind of way, and I loved that. I loved that about the writing, and I also loved that about the direction of it. That you do exactly as you say. You see what is about to happen, except Charlie doesn't see that
Mm,
because he's so busy singing along to his favourite song
yeah,
and kind of thinking he's the cat that's got the cream.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I just loved all of it. I thought it was just a glorious way for him to go.
Mm-mm. Of course, the story that you're most well known for, I would say, probably is the big domestic abuse storyline with Shelley. That was huge for you, wasn't it?
Well, it was just, and again, I keep coming back to the writing and how good and how brave the writing was, because traditionally with domestic abuse, and we're going back now to 2003, 2007, that's when I played
Mm,
Charlie. And at the time, I mean, it's certainly been covered as a subject in a number of other shows, but what hadn't been done a lot, certainly not that I'd seen, was kind of taking somebody apart
mm,
piece by piece over time, and in that kind of way the writers made a really brave choice, which was mental disintegration.
mm,
So the point of that storyline was that Charlie took apart Shelley piece by piece by piece over a prolonged period of
mm,
time. And I remember talking to Tony Wood, who was the producer at the time, and said, "We've just got to hold our nerve here because this is going to be very difficult to do and very unpleasant to do. And there's going to be a lot of people shouting at the television.
mm,
But this is what happens in real life." And I did a lot of work with Women's Aid. The writers did a lot of work with Women's Aid in terms of the National Domestic Violence Charity, and about how a man like Charlie gets away with what he was getting away with behind closed doors. And we did a big thing about what you see in public versus what he is up to in private.
mm.
And there's a big difference between those two things. And what the viewers saw, of course, is what he was getting up to in
Yeah.
private with Shelley and how he was controlling her. And it was back to where we started this conversation, which is what we decided very early on with him was that it wasn't about violence. It's important that he had violence in his locker, but what it was more about was control.
Hmm.
And I talked long and hard with Women's Aid about that, and they were really clear about that as being central to the storyline of an abusive individual like Charlie, but specifically this kind of individual. That actually it's about controlling behaviour more than it is about violence. And so the violence, when it is used, is a tool for coercive control, but it's not a be all and end all in itself.
No.
And so that's so there was only one kind of specifically violent moment where he rips out
Mhm.
Shelley's earrings, which was horrific to
Yeah.
film. And but also brilliant because in that moment you saw what he was capable of, and Shelley knew what he was capable of. And so you don't have to do that again because you've got that hanging over the character and the dynamic of the relationship between both of those characters, that you know he has the potential to do that. So he's just using that as a sort of as a potential tool for coercive control, and therefore he gets his own way in pretty much anything else that he does.
Mm-mm. So was the story, as you talked earlier about auditioning for Charlie, was it always going to be the direction for him that he was going to turn abuser, or did that come later?
No, that came later. It came after about a year and a half. And what was really interesting about it for me, but he was written as a nasty piece of work in the audition.
Yeah.
So when I auditioned for him, there was a sense that that was very much there in the writing. And you get when you do auditions for things like this, you maybe get a paragraph or two paragraphs of backstory, and then you'll get a couple of scenes. And it was very clear to me that he had a darkness. And so that's what I did the audition for him. But when I joined the show, the producers were kind of quite clear. I think they just had a couple of nasty pieces of work in the show. I think Brian Capron and Richard Hillman, just what a
I
brilliant
know,
piece of
I
acting
know.
that one. Did just glorious work. And I think Johnny Rather as well and Joe Carter, I think, had just been in the show. And I think
Mm.
what they were quite keen to is not go there again particularly quickly. So they
Mm.
kind of set Charlie up, often as you might do with a character like this, as very amenable. Sort of quite a cheeky chappy, sort of very sort of affable outside exterior. And then about a year and a half later, they decided to play out a sort of a more violent and a darker storyline. But they set him up certainly to begin with as a very sort of cheeky, sort of chappy. But for me, the bit that I really identified with the character was when they turned him darker, because that's the bit that I'd seen in him at the audition. And so for me, and also when you're playing characters, and I've played a few nasty pieces of work over the years, and I do sort of various different things. I do a lot of theatre as well as
Mm.
television. I play a lot of very nice, kind, upstanding individuals. But what I often quite like about sort of slightly darker humans, their edges are are clearer to define, and from an acting point of view, they're more specific. And
Yeah.
you can see them and you can find them and you can research them. And so for me, and I do a lot of research, that's the kind of the branch of acting that I come from. And so for me, as soon as I saw that in his sort of makeup, it gave me something to aim for
Mm.
from an acting point of view and something specific to play out.
Mm.
And so from that point of view, for me, once the characters start to move a little darker, I had more to hang on to in terms of characterization, and I loved it.
Mm. He was definitely very morally dubious from the start. I mean, I love the relationship between Charlie and Jason, and Charlie was kind of taking Jason, down a bit of
Under his
a,
wing.
under his wing, also kind of, getting him into bad habits with women. Like, wasn't Charlie the one saying, "Yeah, let's just go and sleep with this woman that
Yeah,
you're doing
but
the job
Charlie
for"?
wouldn't see it like that.
No,
He
I
would
know.
kind of see it as kind of sort of helping his kind of young
A protege.
apprentice
Yeah.
to kind of learn how life really is.
Yeah.
And so he would see it as him doing him a massive favor.
Mm,
Almost kind of, I sort of used to think of it as a kind of almost like a big brother relationship.
mm,
And Charlie was really, really fond
yeah.
of Jason and just kind of looking out for him, really.
Mm,
And I loved working with Ryan. What a lovely fella.
yeah.
And so in that kind of a way, it's yeah, he was kind of looking and it, the thing about Charlie is that he did have a moral compass. His moral compass was skew with.
Mm,
But he did have a moral compass, and for me, a lot of the controlling behavior was about revenge, and it's about getting his own back for his own upbringing, and that's no excuse, incidentally. In the real world, you are responsible for your own behavior, absolutely, always, all of the time. But for him, in terms of justifying it, he would kind of go, well, the only way that I can make sure I'd imagine some nasty stuff will have happened to him. So for him, what he's thinking is the only way that I can make sure that the world goes according to how I would like it to go is to control as much of it as I can.
mm,
And so
mm,
in that kind of a way, that he saw the world very much on his own terms, and he's in charge of what happens to him as and when he would like it to happen.
yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what he's teaching Jason. Make sure you are in charge of what happens to you, not the other way around, not on the
Mm,
receiving end of what somebody else might want.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's how he would see it, regardless of how dubious actually that advice, dreadful advice, actually is.
But you're right to say that he had a moral compass because there were some scenes that you did where he was the hero, didn't he? He rescued Roy from some bullies in the cafe one time,
He
and
did.
obviously during the fire at the corner shop, you were saving Sunita and
Dev.
Deb as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And which is why it's such a good bit of writing. Because in the real world, no one is just 100% evil. And there is nuance in all humans. And for a character like Charlie, you have to see what other people could see in him. And you have to be able to warm to a part of him. Otherwise, you just immediately
Mm,
cut him off. And there's nothing really, from a viewer's point of view, to kind of create a relationship with,
yeah.
because you just kind of go, well, he's just a nasty piece of work. I'll forget about him.
Mm,
But yeah, there was a duality to him, and like you say, he had a moral compass. It's just slightly skew with, and but he was very clear about what he thought was right and wrong, and he did stand up for people who were being bullied. And like you say, he was brave
mm,
too, capable of acts of bravery and helping other people out. He just tended to like to do things on his own terms.
yeah. So going back to the Shelley story, then tell me a bit like about what it was like working with Sally Lindsay because she seems like a really lovely lady and a really fantastic actress.
Yeah, just brilliant. She's so versatile because I mean, she's also a comedian and a
Yeah.
comedy actor as well as a brilliant dramatic actor. And it's very difficult to be able to do both of those things. And she has it all. So in that kind of a way, yeah, just wonderful working with her. And
Mm,
I mean, she's funny and as a human being, but also she worked really hard on Shelley and characterization. And I was working really hard on Charlie. And that stuff was difficult because we would be filming quite a lot of scenes on any given day. The stuff where Charlie was locking Shelley up in her room, we'd be filming between 12 and 15 scenes a day. You wouldn't do that very often, but when you did, it was very intense. And it's
mm,
difficult stuff to film this because it carries an emotional heft. You know, it's weighty, this stuff. And so you do, at the end of the day, when you have been filming that stuff, you do feel a little bit wrung out in the
I bet.
best possible way because you're sort of you're both of the characters are going at it. But I loved working with Sally. She's just so good.
Mm. And I think she was the perfect character to pick for the story as well because she was so vibrant and bubbly and full of life before Charlie came along, wasn't she? And you just took that all away from her.
Yeah, you see, the way he would describe it is that's what he would have loved about her, but he would have wanted it for himself
Mm.
and only for himself, not for anybody else to have that. And so that's what he was doing, sort of taking her apart piece by piece, because he wanted it. It's essentially, it's about control and not quite ownership, but kind of. And what he was doing was kind of cutting off, and we talked a lot with Women's Aid about this, cutting off her access to the
Mm.
outside world, cutting off her access to outside
Yeah.
relationships. So the cutting off her financial independence, so that the only person that she was ultimately dependent on was Charlie, and
Mm.
that was all deliberate in the writing, all deliberate in the characterization, and that was the bravery of it. Was that to set that up? It takes time. It's not a sort of wham bam, thank you, ma'am kind of flash of violence. That kind of salami
Mm.
effect of taking somebody apart, making them dependent on you bit by bit by bit by bit by bit takes time. And
Mm.
that was the bravery of the storyline, and why when Charlie thought he was getting married, it was kind of the ultimate kind of it's sort of revenge in that
Yeah.
kind of way and retribution, and he deserved every. There's, at no point did I ever think that Charlie doesn't deserve this in any of the writing, because you kind of go and for me, I just loved consistently how they would write for him that he kind of thinks he's getting his way. His sort of his own self-confidence is his greatest enemy. If he
Yeah.
had a little bit more humility and a little bit less surety of himself, he would have got himself into a lot less trouble.
Mm. You bring up the wedding. That was probably like one of my favorite Corrie weddings ever. Just the joy, the triumph, even like from Bev when she's there in the congregation when Sally walks out on him. So good.
Yeah, it's just again, it's just great writing, and
Yeah.
also Coronation Street does these kinds of things really, really well, where they have storylines kind of coalescing together for one big set piece,
Mm.
and that's exactly how that played out. And actually, in terms of the filming, we filmed that, and obviously in television, you film a lot of stuff out of order.
Yeah.
The wedding was in that storyline was one of the first things we filmed, the wedding
Ah.
and the car chase. And so we had to then work back to it. Sometimes it's quite interesting because but you've got the writing, you know what's going to happen. You haven't filmed it yet, but you know sort of the shape of what's going to happen. And you Jimmy Harkishin, I remember Dev Allahan
Mm.
in Coronation Street talked to me once about it's a bit like those kind of puzzles you used to get in puzzle books where you've got a mouse and lots of different trails trying to
Yeah.
find cheese. And often what you're doing is you're starting with the cheese and then working your way back to the mouse, which is really brilliantly explained. And that is exactly how those scenes worked.
Mm.
We started with the end with the car chase and them sitting in a car and Shelley dumping Charlie. That's where we started, and then we worked our way back for to the rest of the scenes that preceded it.
Mm. What were some of the reactions that you got like on the street when you were playing Charlie?
It's a really good question. All sorts of different things. There were a lot of people who didn't like him at all, which is great because they shouldn't. That's kind of the point with him. And so I did get various sort of things kind of shouted at me as a human being and in the street, and sort of various notes left on my car and that kind of thing. But for me, with a character like that, the point of it is that it resonates with an audience, and that when Coronation Street works really well, any soap works really well. The characters resonate with an audience, and the subject matter resonates with an audience. So for me, with those kinds of storylines, what is really pleasing is when people do become involved in it and do kind of it would talk to you about it. And a lot of people wanted to talk about that storyline,
Mm.
and people would often come up to you in the street and have a natter and those kind of things. And you're sort of pre-mobile phones then,
Mm.
so that you're not getting sort of messages, or if you it's way pre-social
But yeah.
media. So you've got mobile phones, but no social media. So the only way people can sort of reach you, really, we got a lot of letters. I got a lot of letters
Did you?
about what a very unpleasant man he was, which were correct. He was a very unpleasant man, and a number of people tried to save him. I got a number of Bibles in the post, those kinds of things. And you kind of go, and to be honest, those kind of things, I welcome that, because you kind of go, this has resonated, this has landed,
Mm,
and the people are involved in the storyline, and they've understood it, and they care about the characters involved, and they particularly cared because Sally had done such a wonderful job with Shelley. They particularly cared about what happened to her, and so as a piece of writing, and as a piece of sort of filmmaking, I just thought it was glorious, because
mm,
it was
mm.
it was so well considered, so well judged.
Yeah. I think another way that you were able to show that, there is a difference between Bill Ward and Charlie Stubbs. I remember you doing loads of stuff on TV at the time, talking about women's aid. Would you like to say a little bit about kind of your work with that charity?
Yeah, they were just amazing with me. Just amazing. I got in touch with them. So I
Oh, I
wrote
see.
an wrote an unsolicited email, and because I knew the storyline was coming up, and both as an actor but also as a human being, when you have that kind of storyline, there were 12, 13 million people watching. Charlie's Out episode was watched by 13.1, 13.2 million people, I think.
Mm,
So when you are reaching that many people, you have a responsibility with that kind of storyline, in that kind of a show, where the lines between reality and fiction are slightly more blurred than they would be in a film, because you're landing in somebody's living room 6 times a week, on a regular basis. And so you have a responsibility to a storyline that like that, to make it as accurate as you possibly can. And then there's the actor part of me that wants to be able to get under the skin of a character, and to kind of go, who is this man?
mm,
Why is he doing what he's
mm,
doing? Why is his behavior like this? How can I justify it? How can I, well, not that you can ever justify behavior like that, but from an acting point of view, what you're looking to do is motivate it. You're looking to find the thought processes that lead to that kind of behavior.
mm,
So for me, my starting point was, well, who are going to be the experts in this field? Who are going to know the most about this? And for me, it was Women's Aid. So I got in touch with them, and Teresa Parker at Women's Aid was just fantastic in terms of very patiently explaining who a man like Charlie might be, and also introducing me to lots of people who'd been on the receiving end of men like him.
mhm,
And it is usually men like him, incidentally, sort of in terms of numbers and percentages. And so in that kind of a way, I felt very lucky, because they took me to refuges, and so many women who'd been on the receiving end of people like Charlie were so generous with their thoughts and their times and their emotions and feelings, and talking about things that would have been really difficult for them to relive. And so I was just very, very grateful for their generosity in sharing their experiences,
mm,
really, and their
mm,
time. And so, but I learned so much, and in that kind of a way, when you do a lot of work like that, you suddenly become aware. And I was aware of my own ignorance in terms of the numbers involved. 1 in 4 women at the time, it'll still be around something, a number not dissimilar to that, will have an abusive relationship
mm,
in their lifetime. And when you start finding out those kinds of numbers, and that kind of I mean, these are big numbers, and you kind of go, well, I have a responsibility here to make sure as many people know about this as possible. So in that kind of a way, I became an ambassador for
mm.
Women's Aid, and I guess I would still probably be an ambassador for them now. I was part of a film that they made during the pandemic, and
Oh,
just did a voiceover for it. So in that kind of way, I think it was very important to me that I fully researched the subject area, but B, once I'd found out about the subject area, that I was sort of as vocal as I could be
yeah.
about it, because what I found out really it moved me, and I thought it was very important that I should tell as many people about it as possible.
So another memorable scene that I remember with Charlie was that one where he dunks David in the bathtub. Tell me a little bit about that, what that was like to film.
Well, it was Jack Shepherd is just brilliant.
Mm.
It was such good fun to do that. Yeah, I mean, it was dreadful, obviously, back to where we are. It was a dreadful thing to do for another human being to do that to a human being. This is a dreadful thing to do. But in Charlie's world, David had tried to blackmail Charlie about it. Charlie was two-timing Tracy, I
Yeah,
think, at the
yeah,
time with
Maria.
Maria, Samir Ghardi's beautiful, brilliant character, and Charlie was determined to teach David a lesson, and
What is he like 15, 16 or so as well?
yeah, pretty much. So just dreadful. But it was one of those things in the writing when I got it, you kind of go, "Oh, this is a bit punchy."
Mm.
But my kind of thing with it was to try and make it as normal behavior for Charlie as possible. So I
Yeah,
didn't want Charlie to be sort of being really sort of uber kind of violent with it. His whole point was to be teaching David Platt a lesson, and the writing of it, it just had, you know, who put the ram in the Ramalama Ding Dong.
yeah, I
It was
remember.
just so funny. It was so cleverly written, and you kind of go, the clues for this scene, as they often are in the writing, and the writing has him just quietly sort of musing and make it riffing, basically, about what he's going to do to him, and actually one of the interesting things that he talked about, and it gave me a clue into who Charlie might have been and why he was behaving like he did. There's a little line in there, and it's not the sort of thing I didn't sort of point it up, but for me, from an acting point of view, there's a line about his mother about ripping a plaster off
Mm.
his knee, and that he didn't know when she was going to do it, and she always did it when he didn't know she was going to do it, and she was a nasty piece of work. That was the line
Yeah,
that he said. And I
okay.
remember thinking so much of that was really useful for me from an acting point of view, because you kind of go, so much of why he wants to control other people is because as a young boy, he felt very much out of control
Mm.
with whoever his mother. And again, back to his behavior. There are no excuses for his behavior, but in his mind,
Yeah.
this is what he is. This is the story that he is telling himself. This is what he is sort of conjuring.
Mm.
So yeah. So for me, the dunking stuff, and we had a camera. It was shot over two separate days. One
Mm.
was in the bath itself, in the with him putting his head in, and the other was actually in a water tank with a camera
Oh,
directly underneath it,
yeah.
which we shot that separately. And yeah, Jack was just brilliant, bubbles coming out of his mouth, and it was just, I mean, it was pretty horrendous. Again, back to the subject matter. This is horrendous behavior, but what you're trying to do is find ways from a character point of view that you can justify it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
for me, having there was it wasn't in the script, but there was a little yellow duck that I found in the bath, just next to the bath when we were setting up. So I started using that at the top of the scene, because I kind of thought that Charlie might do that kind of a
Yeah.
thing, and it kind of, this is no big deal. I'm going to make light of it, but it's going to be extremely violent. But I'm just going to pretend it's completely normal. And so yes, it was again back to the writing, brilliant writing, and if you've got brilliant writing, you've always got a chance.
Mm. Was there ever anything that the writers asked you to do that you thought even Charlie wouldn't do that?
Not really, actually. I used to go and sort of talk to the producers maybe about sort of 2 or 3 months in advance of storylines. So I had some idea of what was coming up, and we used to talk, and used to talk about control and women's aid and those kinds of things. And I used to talk a lot about the important thing for Charlie is that he thinks he's in charge of all of this stuff.
Mm,
So I always used to really look forward to the scripts because they were really imaginative.
mm,
And the stuff with David Platt was really imaginative, and you kind of and the stuff with Tracy Barlow too was dark but imaginative.
mm.
And so you kind of, I used to love getting scripts for him because you kind of go, what have they thought of this time?
Yeah.
And it was when soaps worked really well, and Coronation Street was brilliant for me in so many ways. But it's all you have is the present. That is all you have. You have a past which you have some sense of, and a
Mm,
future which is unknown.
mm,
All you have is the present. And what happens when it works well is that you have this virtuous circle where the writing feeds the acting, and then the acting feeds the writing. And you kind of get this virtual circle where it kind of amplifies each other. And you will kind of notice something in the writing. You go, oh, that's interesting. And then you'll take it and do something that you hadn't necessarily, or the writers hadn't
mm.
necessarily expected that you might do. And then they'll go, oh, that's interesting. And then they'll take that and use it as a kind of springboard for another part of his character in that kind of a way.
Mm.
So it kind of feeds each other when
I
it
see.
when it works really well. And that's kind of what kind of worked with him and the writing really. So it tended to feed itself in
Yeah.
that kind of way. I never really had anything. And also, when you've got a show like that, what's written is what is. I mean, this is it. This
Mm,
is what is. And you may well have imagined something different in your own backstory. And I'm a big one for backstories. I come from that school of
yeah.
acting. And I'm a theatre actor, really. And all of the kind of Russian sort of theatre training and Stanislavski and all of that kind of stuff. So that's where I go. I'm writing backstories for characters, and a lot of the time, you will get present day stuff that you get in the script in any given week where you kind of go, oh, I didn't think that about him. I'd
Mm,
imagined something else. But this is the truth. What you are given from the writers is what is happening.
yeah.
So for me, in a show like that, you accept it and then you try and find a way to make it work.
Mm,
So yeah, that's what I did. I was getting a lot of that, a lot of very sort of it's like getting presents, little sort of presents every week from the writer. You kind of like, oh, look at this, it's
yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
What can I do with that?
Yeah. Was it the positive experience that you had on Coronation Street that helped drive you to move to Emmerdale a few years later?
Yeah, for me, with something like that, is what you don't want to do is reinvent the wheel. You don't want to go somewhere that you've been before. So for me, with that show, it was very much about finding a character that was very different
Mm,
to Charlie because you don't want to go to that
no.
territory. And for me, in the intervening period, I've been doing spam a lot, you
Mm,
know, that kind of dancing in latex with fruit on my head. So from an acting point of view, that's kind of what I do. I do lots and lots of different characters. Forgive me, but I've done 50 plays, 35 now films and television shows. Corrie and Emmerdale are huge parts of my CV, but only 2 jobs.
yeah.
And so, in that kind of way, I'm used to playing lots of different characters, lots of different kind of humans. That's the joy of doing
Mm,
what we do. And for me, what was important about Emmerdale was if I was going to go that route again, so that was the only job that I'd done similar to Coronation Street in the intervening period. You kind of go, if we're going to go there, he has to be different,
mm,
and his motivations have to be different. And he was very different. What was interesting about James Barton was that he was the perennial nice guy, too nice. That was his problem. He tried to keep everybody happy all of the
mm.
time. and in so doing kept no one happy at any point. So in that kind of a way, and he was the ultimate victim. So having spent my time on Coronation Street, so being someone who's or playing a human who's obsessed about control, you've got James Barton, who's essentially at the whim, A, of his own sons and B, of his own wife. So, in that kind of a way, he was very much not in control of his own destiny. And that was what had drawn me to him
Yeah.
versus Charlie.
You got a pretty memorable exit there as well, didn't you?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah. Chucked off a bridge and run over by multiple vehicles.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah. That was great.
I've not really seen very much of Emmerdale at all, but I have seen the Hot and Bypass crash a couple of times, and what a stunt
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah, it was just amazing. I mean, sort of in terms of budget, they very much for the year chucked the kitchen sink at it, and we had different kinds of cameras for filming, and we had sort of all sorts of stunt crews, brilliant stunt crews. We had sort of cars that were genuinely being crashed at 40 and 50 miles an hour. It was unbelievable to
Mm,
watch, and we did watch it. We had drones flying around. This is back in sort of when at 2016 when there weren't a lot of drones flying around
mm,
in sort of television at the time. So it was a really, really big deal. And we were on a film set in Kent. And it was just magnificent, and from our point of view, I think it was kind of Super Soap Week was how it was
yeah.
kind of billed at the time, and so you're aware that you're part of, and again, it's back to that thing. You have a responsibility to playing your characters, but you also have a huge responsibility to the show because you know how much of the year's budget is being funneled in this direction. So you just want to do as good a job as you possibly can. And yeah, so it was great. Duncan Foster was the director on that, and my goodness me, he did a great job.
He
It was
really
just, yeah, I love that kind of stuff where it's the set pieces. I mentioned it earlier, where and particularly for the Hot and Bypass crash, it was such a clever piece of writing because they had multiple storylines
mm,
sort of converging
converging.
on this one absolutely horrific sort of set piece, and it was so well written, and then they converge, and then the storylines move through the convergence and then out the other side.
Mm,
But for this one kind of week, everything is a kind of just brought together in this kind of ball of drama. It was
yeah.
terrific.
It was. I mean, as a Curry fan, I am sometimes a little bit jealous that that's an Emmerdale stunt and not a Curry stunt because it was so good.
Mm, mm.
You said earlier that you've been in 30 TV shows, 50 plays or so. Are there any other roles that you're particularly proud of having done?
Oh God, yeah. I
Or the
mean,
most proud, I suppose.
yeah, I mean, a lot of them for me would be in theatre. So, the Hairy Ape was one that I did, which was I had to do a New Yorker about a man. It's a Eugene O'Neill play, and it's about a man who falls in love with a gorilla, and in a zoo, and goes into a zoo to talk to him, and it's an extraordinary play. And to play him, I had to change my body shape. I had to put on 2 stone of muscle, and so I literally had to spend 2 months in the gym to
Oh,
play
wow.
him. And also, it's written phonetically in New York vernacular, so it deciphering it, you have to decode the play first into
Yeah.
actual British words to work out what it means. So the character I played was Yank,
Mm,
and who's the guy? He's the stoker on an ocean-going liner, not dissimilar to the Titanic. So he's a huge
mm,
man,
mm.
this great big force of nature. So that was pretty extraordinary. I did an extraordinary show last year, which is probably my career highlight, really, called Jerry and Sewell at
Right.
Newcastle Theatre Royal, which is just it's a very funny, very Geordie. I'm from that neck of the woods,
Mm.
even though I don't necessarily sound it. I
No.
was born and brought up there, and all of my formative life, my brothers and sisters, we all come from there. My aunts and uncles, they're still there. My sister's still there. So in that kind of a way, it was a story that I recognized, and everything in it resonated with me. And I would in sort of, it was literally in tears every night in the warm up for it because I loved it so much. And it was funny, funny, funny. About football, about two guys who will do whatever they can to get a season ticket
Right.
to watch Newcastle United. And yeah, it's just one of the funniest things that I've ever been a part of, and
Mm.
it started as a piece of fringe theatre at Laurel's, which is a very small fringe theatre in Whitley Bay outside of Newcastle, and 3 years later, it's in the Theatre Royal Newcastle, which seats 1,400, selling it out. And
Wow.
it's everything for me that theatre should be,
Mm.
kind of that kind of progression from the fringe to the main house theatre of a region. That's what Theatre Royal is. There's nothing comparable in size until you hit Darlington going south or Edinburgh going north. So in that kind of a way, it's the biggest theatre around there, apart from maybe Sunderland Empire. But
Mm.
as a producing theatre, it's one of the few that makes work around there that is that big. So in that kind of a way, it was just a delight to be a part of. So yeah, that kind of thing, and I toured Full Monty last year, which was
Hmm.
just glorious too, and we're all very close. We're all still in touch. So yeah, so a lot of and that guy who played Gerald, massive gnome lover, completely hopeless. What I love about what we do for a living is just the variety of it, really, and that for me is what keeps me coming back time
Yeah.
and time again. But a
Mm.
lot of what I do is theatre, and I love the interaction between what you do on stage and the live audience in that kind of way. And I love the rehearsal process too, that you get from working on something in a rehearsal room, trying things out. Yeah, maybe that's not working. Let's try this. And so in that kind of a way, I love theatre. Television, very different beast, but
Yeah.
I love it too. Stand and deliver, make instant choices and commit to them. And I love that. There's a
Mm.
visceral
Mm.
thrill that comes with that too. But for me, they both have a place, and I love doing both.
Yeah. I have seen you on stage once, Bill. My wife and I went to see Viva Forever back when that was on at
Aha!
the West
Did
End.
you?
We did.
Yes.
I didn't
Yeah,
even know
what
you
did
were
you
going to be
make
in
of
it
it?
before we went either. But it was like, oh, it's Charlie Stubbs on the stage, and
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
was quite a show. We did actually really enjoy it.
I really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed it. I thought it was great fun.
Yeah.
And the Spice Girls, the biggest, still, I think, the biggest selling girl band
Yeah.
in history worldwide. They've got this extraordinary canon of songs, and just to be on a stage while they're being belted out, it was magnificent. I loved it. It was great fun.
Parading around in a girdle at one point, if I remember
That's
correctly.
right. That's right. That was one of those moments in rehearsals where you go, oh, okay. Well, that's what it takes. That's what it takes. This is what we will do. So,
So,
yeah, that was great fun, that.
acting is kind of one half of your professional life, and looking at all your social media and your website now, landscape photography is your other passion. Tell me a bit about how you got into that and what it is about the medium that speaks to you.
Yeah, it's a yin yang thing for me. So the acting is it's giving out and it's whacking stuff out there. And I would be, and I know this because my daughter brought back a sort of a personality test that they'd all done at school,
Yeah.
and we all sat and did it as a family around the table, and it was fascinating seeing what everyone else in our family was. But for me, it turned out that I was almost exactly 50% extrovert and 50% introvert, which is
Right.
something I had always expected. So in a room of actors, I'm the quiet one. So and anyone who's ever been in a TV show with me or in a play with me will know that I'm the quiet one who sits in the corner and doesn't say anything.
Hmm.
So because actors generally are such warm human beings with so many stories to tell, and I just love listening to them. So for me, acting is very much the extrovert part of me, where
Right.
you take something and you share it with an audience. Photography for me is the introvert part of me, where I regenerate.
Hmm.
I spend time not with other humans, because I can't do that all of the time, but with Mother Nature. And so for me, what I'm doing is I'm spending time with Mother Nature. I have a thing about water and going to the sea, and I will go there, and I'll go there on my own, and I'll go there to very quiet places. I'll go for very long walks with cameras up before an hour before dawn. I won't leave until it gets dark, if I can.
Mm.
And so for me, that's what I'm doing. I'm regenerating, and I'm taking all of the good stuff from Mother Nature, sticking them into me, and that's how I do what I do with the acting. What I've learnt over the years is the more acting that I do, the more photography I need to do to balance the two
Mm.
things out. And if you spend as much time pretending to be other people as I do, and I spend a lot of my time doing that, it's very, very useful to have something that very specifically reminds you of exactly who you are.
Mm.
And so I take photographs for me and only for me. And I take photographs of the thing that please me and only me.
Mm.
And so, in that kind of a way, it's very, very personal. I get to, when I do exhibitions, I get to sign photographs. And I know this sounds a bit daft, but with my name on it.
Yeah.
And when you've got, that's really important to me, where you kind of go, this is who I am. This is what I think and feel. It's this. And so all of the photographs that I make and take have that element to them.
Mm.
And there's a kind of a sense of peace, quiet, and solitude that absolutely runs through my photography work like a stick of rock
Mm.
to balance the glorious madness of the other thing that I do for a living. And so it's very much a yin yang thing that they balance each other out. And just in terms of dates, I've been doing photography professionally since about 2009. So whenever I do an acting gig, if I go on tour, if I do a television show somewhere else, or if I do a theatre job somewhere else, I will always take my camera. And
Mhm.
for if it's theatre, then the process while we're rehearsing, I won't touch the camera at all. I'll be all in on the acting. But once
Mhm.
the show is up and running and you're comfortable with it and you know how it works, then a couple of times a week I'll go out and take pictures. Not a lot, because you've got to keep some energy for the most important part of the day, which is the evening show. And as an actor, you're always working towards that. But I might go out for an hour and a half, maybe a couple of times a week, and take some pictures of whatever I bump into.
Mm.
And for me, and loads of actors when they're touring do different things. Some read books, some do box sets, others go out and go bowling, all of that kind of stuff. I go out with a camera and take pictures.
Mm.
And that's kind of what I do. And my interest tends to be what the first thing I'll do is seek out water wherever I happen to be. And even a fountain in a city centre will do it, or an urban stream, but or waterfalls or the sea or wherever I happen to be. So yeah, so I run the two things very much side by side. I
Mm.
teach it,
Mm.
I run workshops, I give talks all over the world, all of that kind of stuff. It's a very big part of who I am as a human.
Mm. Is there any dream location that you'd really like to photograph one day?
Oh God, that's a good question. Well, I'm gonna slightly sit on the fence here, and say part of the joy of it is wherever you are.
Yeah.
So part of what I like about touring is I'm just about to do the Shawshank Redemption. We
Mm.
start rehearsing on it in a month's time, and part of the joy of that is I'll be going to a whole load of places that I've never been before, and so I love that about what we do for a living, because all of a sudden you land somewhere where you've never been. You kind of go, well, what is it about here that's exciting? And you kind of try and get under the skin of a new place, and you see whatever it is you notice.
Mm.
You come at it completely fresh and see what it is that you notice. So in that kind of a way, I love that. It's anywhere that I haven't been
Yeah.
would be a good place to start. But if you're kind of somewhere like Greenland, it's an expensive place to get to, but goodness me, the raw material is
Yeah. Yeah.
fabulous. And I've spent quite a lot of time in Iceland with a camera. And once you spend time in Iceland with a camera, it's not a short step, sort of imaginatively. It's not a big step imaginatively from there to Greenland. It's kind of Iceland on stilts,
Mm.
essentially. So yeah.
Yeah. Just before we finish, Bill, you said you were going to do the Shawshank Redemption coming up. Do you want to give it a bit of a plug? Tell us a bit about what's going on there. Where are you going to be?
Yes, all over the country from September through to May, June of
Hmm.
next year. So places like Manchester, Edinburgh, Leeds, Bath, all those kinds of places. Northern Ireland,
Hmm.
Belfast. So yeah, and it's what you would call in our line of work a number one tour, and so nice big theatres in nice big places, and so really looking forward to it. It's a great bit of work. It's been out sort of once every 3 or 4 years. It goes out. Ben Onwukwe, who I've did the Full Monty with 2 years ago, and who is a wonderful man, is playing Red, and Andy Dufresne is played by Joe McFadden, who I have also worked with. Actually, also a wonderful man, and I worked with him on Heartbeat years and years ago. I played a lunatic man called Mad Dan Neely who was trying to blow stuff up. He was just obsessed by blowing stuff up. So that was great fun. So really looking, we did the kind of photography for that, the sort of for the posters and the pictures. We did that middle of last week, and we'll start rehearsing towards the middle of August, and then open sort of first week in September in Windsor, and we're going out around the country. So yeah, really looking forward to that. It's such a chunky piece of writing, such a well written piece of work based on the original Stephen King novella from 1982, I think, the Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, but also with nods to the film there too. So yeah, so it's just great. I mean, it was one of my favourite films from the 90s, and I watched it multiple occasions, bought the DVDs, watched all of the extras, the interviews, all of that stuff. It's one of them. So I'm
It is,
absolutely
yeah.
delighted to be doing it.
I've only watched it once, but I remember absolutely loving it, and I kept trying to persuade other people to watch it as well. It's one of those films like you want other people to see it.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting about it, I mean, it's a prison movie about, and there's a lot of darkness in it, but more than anything else, it's about hope
Mm.
and redemption and humanity and friendship, brotherhood and love. And it's really, really interesting in that way that from such bleakness, such optimism can evolve. And so, in that kind of a way, it's just a beautiful piece of writing. And yeah, really looking forward to doing it.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that then, Bill. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's been lovely reminiscing over your time as Charlie, nearly 20 years ago now since you left
It
there. But
is, yeah,
you've
2000.
remembered it as clear as a bell, and that's what we like here. So thank you.
My complete pleasure, Michael. Thank you for asking. He was such a for me. He was very I hadn't done much telly when I started doing Charlie. So for me, he was a real opportunity, and I
Mm.
loved him, and I learned so much. A from all of the crew and about making television, but B about acting, and so in that kind of way, it's a job that is very sort of a big part of me and is very close to my heart because
Mm.
he was huge fun to do.
Yeah.
Brilliant writing, as I've kept saying sort of throughout this interview. I loved it as a piece of work. It was,
Yeah.
and I'm very fond of it still.
Yeah, and he really honestly has gone down as one of Corrie's most memorable villains, I'm going to say. Especially one that hasn't killed somebody. You know, you got your big names like
Yeah,
your Hillman and your others with the serial killers. But as somebody who's not a killer, I'm going to say that Charlie really is up there as one of the
yeah,
most memorable.
yeah. It was just interesting. Yeah, yeah, great fun to play. Thank you. It's very kind of you, Michael. Thank
No
you for
worries.
inviting me.
No worries. Well, thank you for having me, everybody. And good luck with your play later this year.
Thank you. Yeah, really
Cheers.
looking forward to it. Thank you
Right.
so much.
Cheers. Bye bye.
All the best, Michael. All the best. Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.
All the best.